Hi, it's Marcus Gonzo with the MA Properties Online team with your Arlington market update for Q1. I'm going to change the metrics we look at this month, of course, based on where we are to try and give everybody a sense of where we are today, but perhaps even more important, where we are or where we will be, when we come out of this crisis in perhaps the next 1 to 2 months' time. So let's take a look at the number of listings in Arlington in the first 3 months of the year. This year we had 68 new listings. Last year we had 59. That's about a 15% increase. We can explain some of that by the mild winter. We had a lot of homes coming on the market in Arlington early on in that late January, early February timeframe. Interestingly though, if you now look at March, the first week of March, first 2 weeks of March, about the same number. But that second 2 weeks of March, or the second half of March, we saw a 50% drop in the number of listings. So as we got to the lockdown in Massachusetts, as people begin to realize that this was actually very serious, and we begin to close down open houses and so on, we saw the number of listings decline dramatically, really. So that 15% increase overall shows us, I think, how buoyant the Arlington market is, even where we are today, and that will have implications for where we will end up in the future. Take a look quickly at the normal metrics we look at. 43 homes sold in Arlington in the first 3 months of the year. Average days on the market, 35, with a 100% sell price to list price ratio. Remember, that's a metric that we always look at because it's very much a measure of buyer confidence, if you will. Those are low numbers in comparison to what we would ordinarily expect, but that's not surprising because a home that sold, for example, in February went under agreement in December, and so that November-December timeframe, are very buoyant, are very weak times, and so we would expect those numbers to be somewhat depressed. Interestingly, though, in March, those properties that went under agreement in February and sold in March, that ratio was 103%, which is much more what we would expect in an ordinary market here in Arlington. And that was definitely our experience too. In early March, we brought a home on the market, 18 offers on it. Mid-March, towards the end of March, so that third week of March, we brought a home on the market, we got 4 offers on it. And we brought another condominium on the market as well that same weekend, and we got 3 offers on that. So you can see that early March, 18 offers. The second half of March, that number reduced from 18 to 4. That's really a consequence of the crisis. If you look at other towns, that buyer confidence or that lack of buyer confidence came a little early, came in about mid-February, because if you remember back, it seems like a long time ago now, but in mid-February there was a stock market crash. And that very much affected the higher end homes where many of those buyers had considerable equity tied up in the stock market. So they saw a considerable reduction in their net wealth because of the stock market crash. And so the higher price points in other towns saw that negative sentiment from the buyers much earlier than we did in Arlington, where many of the buyers are first-time home buyers and are not that exposed to the stock market. So early or mid-Feb crash, less of a concern, but now we get into the second 2 weeks of March with the pandemic in full throw here. That's when we saw the buyer confidence across all price points begin to take quite a serious hit. So what does that mean for the future? Well, it's likely that we're going to see less homes on the market, almost no homes on the market, probably in April. I would guess 80% reduction in the number of listings in April. Very difficult to show occupied homes. Vacant homes, yes, they can be showed. But with an occupied home, it's much more difficult. Much more difficult to list it, much more difficult for the buyers to get in. So I think we'll probably see anything up to a 60 to 80% reduction in the number of listings in April. And that may well continue into May. So if we use that as a likely scenario that April and May will see very few listings, what that means is that the listings that would have come on in those pivotal 2 months, April, May is always the time when most listings come on. They will now come on in that June, July timeframe. Some sellers, of course, will think, I'm going to put it off till 2021. But I think we will see a larger number of homes coming on the market in that June, July timeframe. Now, what about the buyers? This is the key one because we really don't know what this recession is going to look like. It's clearly coming. Is it going to be a V-shaped? Is it going to be a U-shaped? And if it's a U-shaped, how long will that bottom last? It looks likely that it will be U-shaped, and it looks likely that it will extend well into 2021. So it is not going to be an in and out, if you will. It's not going to be that V-shaped recession. For some people, clearly, they will be back at work really quickly. For many people, though, we'll see it being much longer, as say, lasting probably well into 2021. So in terms of buyers, some buyers will have confidence to come back into the market. Their jobs will be, perhaps they were working from home, they were never laid off, they were never furloughed. For a larger number of buyers, though, they will be worrying about that, and perhaps the specter of that coming on in the future as we go through probably a series of waves of this pandemic kind of peaking and troughing. So we will see less buyers in the market in 2020, probably into 2021. So here we have lots of buyers, or lots of sellers, not that many buyers. And so it will transition very much from a seller's market that we've seen historically, and certainly we saw in the first 3 months of this year, first 2.5 months of this year, into much more of a buyer's market as we move into the rest of 2020 and perhaps even into 2021. In terms of what sellers should be doing in this market, everything is digital. Open houses are not allowed. The state doesn't allow them. Buyers wouldn't go to them anyway. So everything is digital. We're seeing huge traffic to our single property websites. We create a website for every home we bring on the market. We're seeing huge traffic to those websites. Huge traffic to view our video, our 3D tour, all of those digital way of looking at the home. That's where the buyers are spending the majority of their time. And only if they think that's a house that they are really interested in, having seen everything online, will they organize a private showing. That will inevitably continue. And so if you're thinking of putting your home on the market, it's clear that you need to have the full spectrum of digital assets. That's a virtual tour, that's a video, that's high quality photographs, that's a website. All of that information needs to be there, and it needs to be easily accessible. In terms of the buyers in this market, many, as I say, will feel confident to come back into the market. It's likely they'll be looking for a bargain, though, just because they will know that there are many sellers and not that many buyers. So it's likely we'll see some downward pressure on prices. Inspections will inevitably be back. So it will change, say, very much from a seller's market that we saw the first 2.5 months of this year, very much to a buyer's market with depressed prices moving forward. Somewhat similar to what we predicted in the Arlington Market Review for those that have seen it, but clearly not on the scale that we anticipated when we wrote that in early January. So that's where we are in terms of today. Clearly, it's changing rapidly. We'll keep an eye on the market, clearly. We'll be back in late April or early May to give you, when we have a better sense of how April is playing out and whether we think homes are going to come on the market in early May, or perhaps my prediction, for what it's worth, in late May. That's when we'll see a lot more homes coming on the market. So with that, I'll wrap up. Please stay safe, and we will see you again in late April, early May, when we've got a better handle on how we think we're going to pull out of the crisis that we find ourselves in. Bye.